Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Maritimer from northern New Brunswick here, East Coast Canada. We have a local regional legend of a phantom ship that's seen dozens of times every year. I saw it firsthand. It was more cool than scary. The legend goes that there was a ship out in a storm in the Cheller Bay, and a lightning strike hit it and it caught on fire. It was blazing instantly, and the crew inside were burning alive, and you can hear their shrieks and screams, while the flaming crew on fire jumped off board. The flaming ghost ship is seen before a storm, or after a storm. The difference is the story or why they are cursed. It varies from punishment from selling natives to the slave trade, to murder of a lady, to murder of a fellow crew member who cursed them. I know of local fishermen who don't like talking about it because they think people will call them crazy. My neighbor saw an old sailing boat on fire and heard the screams of men on it. He tried getting closer to help. He was able to see the crew on fire jumping off the boat. When he got closer, the boat went further out to sea in a blink of an eye and faded away. As for my personal experience, it was just before a freak storm. I was with my parents going to a friend's house along the coast, and we saw this orange glow on the water. We continued to drive up the coast to get closer, and we got close enough to see that indeed it was the shape of an old sailing boat with masts. It faded away, and soon fog rolled in and a freak thunderstorm started. Was kinda spooky.
For various reasons, I ended up on a commercial boat in the 1980s going to the Soviet Union. The carried load, I have no idea about naval or shipping terms, so bear with me. On the ship was mundane but valuable, and I had been volunteered to accompany the ship. We came into the port, the name of which escapes me, but the guys on board had done this 1,000 times before, so I wasn't too worried. Personally, I had never been to the Soviet Union. I'd been in Eastern Europe but never the Soviet Union, and it was a new experience for me. The KGB unit responsible for the port came down to supervise. They kept us on the ship, in the bar, thankfully, for the duration of their inspection. This lasted 2 days as the load was processed, and they camped out. We were allowed to leave the ship, but only to go about 20 yards up the path where there was another armed guard. They didn't speak a word of English, so we weren't exactly big on conversation, but we remained on good terms through smiles and cigarettes. You could see the town in the daylight, and everyone commented on what a shithole it was. I've seen some real dumps in my time, and that was in the top 5. Black smoke, concrete, acid rain. Properly vile. Huge rusted hulls and creaking structures. At the end of the second day, a full colonel came down. His English was very good. He explained to us that we had been held for so long because they suspected people of wanting to leave the Soviet Union, illegally stowed on our boat. From the back, a very dour and sarcastic Australian said, "Oh. And why would they want to do that?" and pointed out the window at the port town. At that point I prepared myself for counting trees and being hooked up to the mains of the local police station. The KGB man smiled, the most sinister smile I've ever seen, and told us that we could be soon on our way if there were no irregularities. No one spoke until we left Soviet waters. The Australian thought it was funny. No one else did, especially a Chinese guy whose family had escaped one communist regime and had no intention of finding himself imprisoned in another one. When I got back and did the usual interview you had to do when you visited a country behind the Iron Curtain, I neglected to mention the incident. I wondered if the KGB officer understood the sarcasm, or if he was genuinely surprised anyone would risk their life to leave that absolute tip.
I'm a merchant mariner, with a couple summers of sea time under my belt. I've seen some weird stuff in the Atlantic, Mediterranean, and Arctic Ocean. If anyone has any questions about ocean myths and cryptids, I'd love to give my answer. I also dive and have a degree in marine environmental science. And I've seen odd stuff while diving too.
Have you or your associates had any encounters with phantom divers?
Yes, actually. But this story happened to my uncle, who isn't a sailor, just a diver. He was diving the Atocha shipwreck. A very cool dive that I'd love to do. The Atocha isn't supposed to be haunted. However, the son of the treasure hunter, Mel Fisher, who was looking for it, died at sea. I have a good source that Mel's son was super drunk when the boat sank, which led to his death. Also, Mel had some weird knowledge about the ship. He swore that there were lots of emeralds on the Adacha when it sunk, but there was never any record of that being the case. But when they found the shipwreck, emeralds everywhere. So my uncle was diving with a stranger as his buddy, and swam down to try and find some treasure, which supposedly is still pretty common on that wreck. After about 5 minutes, he butted back up with his partner. For whatever reason, this stranger assigned to him by the charter was heading way out past the wreck. My uncle didn't want to leave his partner alone, so he kept going out, trying to pull this guy back in. The guy wouldn't listen, and kept motioning for my uncle to follow him farther out. Eventually, he turned around and realized the boat was nearly out of sight, so he swam back. Waiting for him there was his diving buddy. The guy had lost track of my uncle when he went to look for treasure. He ended up just partnering up with another group. At the end of the dive, everyone was accounted for on the boat. Nobody admitted to leading my uncle so far away from the shipwreck, and everyone else was with their buddies the whole time. If that doesn't qualify as a phantom diver, I don't know what does.
The Flying Dutchman. This is the most famous of all ghost ships. It has been reported to be seen in stormy weather off the Cape of Good Hope, but now again has been seen in other waters of the world, including Australia. For nearly 300 years, the folklore of the sea has spoken of a ghostly Dutch brig condemned to sail the oceans for all eternity. Some people say she originally carried the plague, whilst others say that the captain was to blame for her demise, having to now beat ceaselessly against the gales of Cape Horn. The term Flying Dutchman actually refers to the captain, not his ship. Legend has it the maniacal Dutch sea captain was struggling to round the infamous Cape of Good Hope in the clenches of a ravaging gale that seriously threatened to sink the ship and all on board her. His crew warned him of the impending dangers that lay ahead, and along with the passengers pleaded for him to turn around. The captain, in either a drunken stupor or suffering from madness, refused to change course. Instead, he pressed on, singing loud and obscene songs, before he lowered himself below to his cabin to drink beer and smoke his pipe. Huge, towering waves continued to constantly pummel the sides of the ship. The terrifying winds howled and whistled, and the masts of the ships creaked and groaned under the enormous pressure. As the sails continued to tear and rip, the captain held his course, challenging the wrath of God Almighty by swearing a blasphemous oath. Finally, there was mutiny on board the vessel. The crew and the ship's passengers attempted to take control of the ship, but as the captain was aroused by the commotion, he killed the leader of the rebellion and threw him overboard. It is said that at the moment the body hit the water, the clouds parted, and a shadowy figure materialized on the quarterdeck.
"You're a very stubborn man,"
the shadow said, and the captain answered him with a curse. "I never asked for a peaceful passage," the captain went on. "I never asked for anything, so clear off before I shoot you too." But the figure didn't move. Drawing his pistol, the captain fired at the spectral being, but the gun exploded in his hand. At this point, the figure spoke again, and this time told the captain he was cursed.
"As a result of your actions, you are condemned to sail the oceans for eternity with a ghostly crew of dead men, bringing death to all who sight your spectral ship, and to never make port or know a moment's peace. Furthermore, gall shall be your drink, and red-hot iron your meat."
The captain, reckless to the last, cried, "Amen to that." Many authorities have argued that the story of the Flying Dutchman has its origins from real events, though there is very little agreement about what the event was. Further confusion is brought into the matter by the fact that there are many versions of the tale, in which the ship's skipper is variously named Vanderdecken, Van Diemen, Van Diemen, or Van Straten. For centuries from then on, the Flying Dutchman has been seen piloting his spectral vessel, its canvas sails spread and its mast creaking and groaning in a terrifyingly gusty wind. Australian waters are no stranger to the Flying Dutchman and his phantom ship. In 1881, the future King George V of England and his brother, the Duke of Clarence, recorded in their journals a sighting of the ghost ship from the deck of HMS Bacante off the Australian coast, whilst en route from Melbourne to Sydney. Here is a short transcript from his log. "At 4 a.m. the Flying Dutchman crossed our bows. A strange red light as of a phantom ship all aglow, in the midst of which the mast, spars, and sails of a brig 200 yards distant stood out in strong relief as she came up on the port bow. The lookout man on the forecastle reported her as close on the port bow, where also the officer of the watch from the bridge clearly saw her, as did also the quarterdeck midshipman, who was sent forward at once to the forecastle, but on arriving there, no vestige was to be seen either near or right away to the horizon, the night being clear and the sea calm. 13 persons altogether saw her, but whether it was Van Diemen or the Flying Dutchman must remain unknown. The Tourmaline and the Cleopatra, who were sailing on our starboard bow, flashed to ask whether we had seen the strange light. Sighting the Flying Dutchman was a presage of doom. On the following morning, the sailor who had reported the ghost ship fell from the foremast onto the deck and was killed instantly. On arriving in Sydney, the admiral was struck down with a sudden illness. The last ship's captain to see the doomed Waretta as she disappeared into a hurricane off the eastern coast of Africa in 1909 claims he sighted a ghostly sailing ship with old-fashioned rigging following her into the storm.
Orang Medan. One of the most infamous ghost ship stories of the 20th century, the story of the Orang Medan has been greeted with its fair share of skepticism due to conflicting accounts of the events as well as no documented evidence of a ship by that name having ever existed. According to the story, at some point around June 1947, other accounts placed the incident at February 1948, two American vessels navigating the Strait of Malacca, City of Baltimore and Silver Star, picked up distress messages from the Dutch merchant ship Orang Medan. A radio operator aboard the troubled vessel sent the following message, SOS. From Orang Medan. We float. All officers including the captain, dead in the chart room and on the bridge. Probably the whole of crew dead. A few confused dots and dashes later 2 words came through clearly, I die. Then, nothing more. When the Silver Star crew located and boarded the seemingly undamaged ship, they found it littered with corpses, including a dog, with no survivors and no visible signs of injuries on the dead bodies. A fire then broke out in the ship's for cargo hold, forcing the boarding parties to evacuate the Dutch freighter, thus preventing any further investigation. Soon after, Orang Medan was observed to explode and sink. Some speculate the Orang Medan might have been involved in the smuggling of chemical substances such as potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin or even wartime stocks of nerve agents. If sea water would have entered the ship's hold, it would have reacted with the cargo to releasing toxic gases, which then caused the crew to succumb to. Later, the sea water would have reacted with the nitroglycerin, causing the reported fire and explosion. Earlier versions of the story also include an account of a sole survivor washed up on a remote island who claimed, before himself dying, that poorly secured sulfuric acid had caused the tragedy. Kodiak Dinosaur. On April 15, 1969, a 65-foot shrimp boat called the M.V. Mylar was dragging for shrimp off the coast of Raspberry Island in the Shelikof Strait near Kodiak Island, Alaska. Fitted with the most advanced sonar technology of the time, the Simrad EH-2A, the crew was shocked by the radar image of what appeared to be a 150 to 180 foot long anomaly approximately 55 fathoms beneath them. The object appeared to be a living creature with a distinctly dinosaur-like appearance with 4 flippers, a long neck and short tapered tail, plesiosaur. First brought to international attention by esteemed author, adventurer and paranormal investigator, Ivan T. Sanderson, the facts surrounding this case offered some of the most intriguing proof for the existence of a heretofore unknown species of colossal aquatic fauna. However, as the graph printout of the radar has long since been lost, little solid evidence remains of the incident.
Lake Vostok, the largest of Antarctica's nearly 400 subglacial lakes. Lake Vostok is nearly 4,000 meters (1,100 feet) beneath the icy surface and is the 6th largest lake on the planet, containing meltwater that may be purer than the most advanced double distillation processes. This mysterious body of water, believed to have been sealed off 15 to 25 million years ago, remains unfrozen due to a number of speculated factors ranging from pressure to volcanic activity to the possible salinity of a lower, denser brine layer. Prompted by the discovery of bizarre microscopic life forms in the eerie red waters of Antarctica's Taylor Glacier Blood Falls, a 5-million-year-old blood-red salt water from subglacial lakes forced to the surface through fissures. Russian scientists hope to find prehistoric life within Lake Vostok. Drilling over 2 miles down into the ice, the expedition first succeeded in penetrating the lake in January of 2013. However, the pressurized water rushed up the borehole, mixing with the kerosene and freon, contaminating the sample. A second borehole in 2015 avoided this mishap, producing a pristine sample from the prehistoric lake, which Russian scientists have since been able to isolate over 3,500 unique gene sequences within. Future plans for the Russians include sending a mechanical probe down into the lake to explore this vast prehistoric ecosystem as it exists today.
Australian Enigma. Although the facts surrounding this incident are scarce at best, what we do know is that in 1808 eyewitnesses reported that an Australian three-masted bark was allegedly attacked by an unknown animal, which, according to the account, had climbed across bow and bitten or chewed one of the hands. Described as having eyes the size of a warrior's shield, there are precious few alternate details from which to draw a portrait of this aggressive, and presumably large, semi-aquatic beast. While it has been suggested that, due to its large eyes, this creature may be related to the giant squid, the distinct absence of any tentacles or a beak-like maw in description would seem to indicate otherwise. In fact, some have even drawn connections between this beast and the UB-85 atrocity. According to the account, the creature's vicious onslaught continued until the captain went below deck, only to return with 2 firearms. The captain purportedly fired the pistols into each of the creature's gigantic eyes, at which point it slipped back into the sea, never to return again. An interesting, though likely unrelated footnote, 1808 was also the year that Scotland's notorious Stronsay beast washed ashore.
Gloucester sea serpent. In August 1817, reports of a giant sea serpent that moved rapidly through the harbor were reported in Gloucester, and the serpent went known as Gloucester sea serpent. It was said to have a turtle-like head adorned with a spear or horn and the body as wide as a barrel. The reports gained so much momentum, the Linnean Society of New England assembled a team to collect evidence, and David Humphreys traveled to collect eyewitnesses' reports. The Linnean Society of New England published a report that the sightings were evidence about a new animal, Scoliophis atlantica. The name was not appreciated, and received a lot of parodies. In April 1859, a creature fitting the description of the serpent attacked the British sailing vessel Banner.
Her Majesty's ship Daedalus Serpent. It's hard to dispute a sea serpent sighting when the captain of a naval ship and several members of his crew all claim to have witnessed it. That's just what happened in August 1848, when Her Majesty's ship Daedalus, a member of the Royal Navy's fleet, was sailing to St. Helena, Indiana, the South Atlantic. The ship's captain, Captain McQuay, as well as several members of his crew, claimed a sea beast approximately 60 feet in length passed by their vessel with 4 feet of its head raised out of the water. It passed so close to the ship that the captain suggested that had it been an acquaintance of his, he would have recognized him. It remained in sight of the crew for 20 minutes, and one member of Her Majesty's ship Daedalus noted it looked more reptilian than serpentine. The sighting became rather famous and remains the only instance of an encounter with this particular water monster. It was reported in the Times of London and today remains a mystery.
U-28 creature. Contained in the official report of German U-boat 28's sinking of a British transport is the astonishing account of a giant creature caught in the explosive aftermath. On July 30, 1915, U-28 torpedoed the British cargo ship Iberian. Shortly after disappearing beneath the waves, the wreckage exploded, blasting a 60 feet, 18.3 meters, long crocodile-like creature nearly 80 feet, 24.4 meters above the water, where it was observed by U-28's captain and commanders. As the creature writhed among the debris, the crew noted that it had 4 legs with large webbed feet, a long, pointed tail and a head which also tapered to a point. This official military report gives incredible backing to the story, as to fabricate such a description would have been career self-end.
Cape Sable Serpent. A 50-foot-long, barnacle-covered, stalk-eyed, tusked, serpentine creature. The Cape Sable Serpent remains, like many other cryptids of the 70s cryptid UFO craze, a relatively isolated incident with only 3 documented encounters during July of 1976. First sighted by Canadian angler Eisner Penny while fishing near Cape Sable Island, off the coast of Nova Scotia, not far from the alleged hunting grounds of the Gloucester serpent. Penny glimpsed the mammoth creature slowly rising and diving in the surf. Assuming it to be a whale due to the size, it quickly became apparent that the creature was anything but when it drew alongside his boat, prompting him to flee and traumatizing him so much he refused to set out on water for weeks afterwards. The second sighting was by Keith Ross and his 24-year-old son Rodney while anchored in foggy waters several miles off Pollock's Ledge. When Rodney saw something stirring in the water, His father dismissed it as a sunfish, but the two men were struck in awe when a 50-foot creature emerged from the murky depths of the fog and headed straight for their boat. They described it as having red bloodshot eyes as big around as saucers that were set in sockets but protruded on stalks. Its mouth was wide open, brandishing two large tusks from its upper jaw, and as it passed them they noticed its lumpy barnacle-covered reptilian hide and vertically finned tail. Rodney described the beast, in all, appearing almost like a giant crocodile with some features resembling a seahorse. The third and final encounter in this incident occurred a few nights later when fisherman Edgar Nickerson and his 15-year-old son Robert heard the Leviathan splashing in the fog while they were pulling up fishing gear. Thinking it was a whale, they turned on their sounder to scare it off. But the creature continued towards them, terrifying both men, who could only describe it as the devil. A modern sighting from May 4, 1997 comes from two fishermen, Charles Bungay and C. Clark, who were out fishing in Fortune Bay on the southern coast of Newfoundland when they saw what seemed to be a group of floating garbage bags. In their attempt to be environmentally conscious, they approached the area only to see a 6-foot-long neck and horse-like head emerge from the water. Though attributed to the Cape Sable serpent, the description of the creature in this sighting seemed quite different from the beast encountered back in 1976.
Quackers. During the Cold War, Soviet ballistic missile submarines began encountering a strange acoustic phenomenon while passing through certain zones on their patrols in the northern seas. Dubbed Quackers, Russian rendition of a frog noise. These sounds behaved as if they were being emitted by underwater moving objects, but failed to register on the active sonar. When the subs would eventually leave the patrol zone, the objects would mysteriously disappear after emitting one final quack. Exhibiting behavior not unlike a living being or manned vessel, the Quackers showed obvious interest in the submarines, circling them and actively avoiding sonar pulses. The speed of some of these objects, estimated from Doppler shift of their sound frequency, was in the range of 200 km per hour, much faster than any then known man-made vessel. Contact was attempted on several occasions, but, apart from some obvious reactions, changing the pitch or origin point of the sounds, nothing came of it. The peak of Quacker activity occurred at the end of the 1970s, when these zones of activity appeared to multiply and spread from the Barents Sea to other areas including the North Sea and the North Atlantic. The Soviet Academy of Sciences was brought in to form a joint commission with the Navy to address the national threat these posed. But after a decade of inconclusive findings and the decline of the phenomenon, the commission was disbanded. 52 Hertz whale. A whale of unidentified species has been detected numerous times in multiple locations since it was first detected in 1989, producing an incredible 52 Hz song significantly louder than the largest known whale species, the blue whale, 15 to 20 Hz. Though its migration pattern seems similar to that of blue and fin whales, the pattern of its song matches no known species. Only ever detected on hydrophone, the appearance and size of this lone individual remains a complete mystery, leaving many to speculate as to whether it may be a malformed, gigantism, or deaf individual of a known species. All that is certain about the 52 HTZ whale is that it has been detected every year without fail since 2004, traveling an estimated distance of 708 to 11,062 kilometers during its migration.
Be me, in the Navy, in the 90s. Work on airplanes, in a squadron, only go out to the carrier with the air group. Have several 2 to 4 week detachments to prepare for deployments. These are called workups. Start a 2-week workup. First night of flight ops. We have a small sortie recovering, so half of the shop heads down to eat. I go eat. When we return to the work center, everyone who was on the flight deck for the recovery had the same story. Strange orange, yellow, gold light hanging in the sky. The strange light then zoomed back and forth. Then rose straight up and stopped. The back and forth again. Then zoomed up and disappeared. Everyone was excited and talking about it. Confirmed story with people in other work centers who were on the roof and saw the light. No reason to doubt my shipmates, kinda miffed I didn't get to see it. Fast forward 2 weeks. Last night of nighttime flight ops. I'm working on the flight deck. Launching aircraft. Me and the plane captain waiting for the yellow shirts to come move our aircraft. Look up and see this weird orange, yellow gold light. It looked like it was hanging in the sky, but it was also moving along with the ship. Pacing us. I watch it for 10 seconds or so. Stays in the same spot in the night sky, still pacing the ship. I asked the PC, hey, is that like the light from the other night? He said he didn't see it then and maybe the light we see is the guard helicopter. I say no, that's the guard helo and point to the helicopter green, red lights flying maybe half a mile on the complete other side of the ship. We both look back and watch the weird light for a couple more seconds. It just disappears. Just blinks off. PC and I look at each other and say WTF at the same time. Look up at the island and there's watches coming out of the bridge and looking in the direction the light was. Then the yellow shirts showed up and we got back to work. Still gives me chills.
Be me 2 summers ago. Living at home with mom because of NEAT. Crippling back pain from a god-awful mattress. Can't sleep because of debilitating pain. Stay up all night, marathon Demon Slayer anime. Start to lose interest around the Spider Family arc but power through. Finish season, disappointed with it. About 6 a.m. Live near the beach. Might as well try to walk a little and see if I can't spot some morning whales or dolphins. Difficult, but managed to get dressed and slowly make my way out to the beach. Some people went out, mostly oldies or joggers. Sink my toes into the sand. See Catalina Island in the distance. Wait, what's that? Something is sticking up out of the water maybe a couple 100 feet from the shoreline. A tall steel cylinder. I can't tell what the hell this thing is. It's just floating out there. There's what looks like a big circular disc underneath it. Looks kind of like a giant satellite dish. Hobble as quickly as possible back inside. Grab binoculars. Get back out. Still there. Use binoculars. It sunk a little into the water, but yeah, still a big narrow cylinder coming out of a weird flat dish thing. Stare at it for a while. Notice the little sailboat. People on it were staring at the metal thing. Look around. No joggers or old folks paying attention. Go back to staring at the disc. Eventually I get bored. Go back inside for breakfast and more anime. Tell mom about it when she wakes up. Thinking back to it, I have this weird notion that I saw humanoid figures on the disc with the cylinder, but I genuinely can't recall if I did or I'm mixing this memory up with the sailboat that for sure had people on it. The whole situation was really weird in general. It definitely wasn't a boat or submarine, at least not one that I've ever seen, and I've never seen anything like it since.
This story is from my cousin. I believe this happened in the early to mid-2000s. I spent the better part of a summer helping a childhood friend with his commercial fishing business. It was a crazy, sometimes grueling experience, but I learned a lot. Complex fishing equipment, techniques, reading the weather in the sea, trawling, state regulations. Overall, a bunch of pretty cool shit. One night we are on a squid expedition. If you don't know about catching squid, it's done at night and with massive lights placed around the sides of your boat. Squid are attracted to the one source of light and come up towards the surface, into your net. It was late in the season, so it was just us. We cruised around different areas, without much luck, about halfway between Monterey and Santa Cruz. My friend spotted another vessel without any lighting, which is pretty unsafe. Not to mention illegal. We got a bit closer and shone a light towards it, revealing a derelict panga boat just floating adrift. As we drew closer, I hooked it and pulled it towards us. My friend repeatedly yelled for anyone on board, but given its small size and open body, it was obvious no one was there. I tied it off and carefully climbed on board with a flashlight. There were a few bags scattered around, but nothing indicating where it might have come from. Both my buddy and I get a weird feeling and tell each other so. I then tell him I'm going to check out the bags and look for any sort of registration or ID. The first is a long duffel bag, which I unzip to find a bunch of plastic wrap. I dig in through a couple layers to find several white bricks. I smell one of them and it has a familiar gasoline smell. If you know, you know. My buddy hops down and begins opening other bags. Yep, there is a fuck ton of cocaine on this little boat. It makes sense. In recent years, the Central Coast has become a popular entry point for drug traffickers. Traditional ports in Southern California have become increasingly hot, so cartels are loading up these small panga boats near the border and hauling ass north. We both sit in silence for a few moments, unsure of our next move. I catch this glimmer beneath one of the duffel bags and move it to the side. Shell casings. Maybe 5 or 6. Hey, check it out, I say to my friend, who is now lifting other bags to reveal more shells. My buddy grumbles.
What the fuck happened?
Whoever was in the boat, maybe 2 guys, given the different calibers, let off a bunch of rounds but left all the cocaine. I speak up. I don't know, but if the Coast Guard came through right now, we'd be fucked. So what do you want to do? He cracked a mischievous grin, then I did too.
Say no more. Say less, in fact.
We tossed the 2 large duffel bags back onto our boat. I realized we didn't even check the backpack that was next to them. Inside were 2 freezer bags, packed with light blue pills. I zipped it back up and tossed it on board. My friend brought up the point that we had boarded this and our fingerprints were all over the boat. We made an executive decision and pulled the drainage plug out before climbing back onto his boat. We stood and watched in silence as the small boat filled with water and eventually sank. As it began to submerge, the boat upended, revealing what appeared to be a row of indented scrapes on the bow, the unmistakable radius and cluster of a shark bite. The shell casings floated around the surface for a while before going under, disappearing any evidence of whatever happened. As we hid the bags, we speculated on what went down on that boat. Nothing really added up. If it were law enforcement, there would be no boat or drugs. If it were other criminals, there definitely would be no drugs. It for sure had something to do with those bite marks. They were big enough that it must have taken a shark ramming and locking onto the bow with incredible pressure. Certainly enough to knock a man out and into the water. We shuddered at the thought of some predator getting to them, and decided to not think about it. The year following that night was one of the craziest, most fun times of my life. It culminated in a new Corvette, a trip to Italy, a bunch of hot girls, and a nasty addiction I'm still paying the price for. My buddy paid off his boat, and that's what helped him really get his business off the ground. He's still doing it today, contracting with several local restaurants and making a name for himself in the community. When we hang out, he'll jokingly say he owes his success to a killer shark and a couple of dead guys. In a way, he's right. And the thought of whatever attacked those unlucky narcos is enough to keep me out of the sea for good.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.